What's up, everybody? Welcome to this live stream that doesn't have a name. I'm Jared Bailey. That's Tanya Fox, the phenomenal Tanya Fox. Tanya, I'm glad that we're able to do this finally. It's been forever.
I know, yeah, and thank you for having me on. We really do have fun engaging on Twitter, and there's
Hmm.
very few people I can say that about. And I mean, there's a lot of people who like always agree with me that it's like, oh, that's nice to
Right.
hear, but we don't always agree, and we still have fun, and that's like really it's a unique thing to have. So it's good to be on with you.
Well, it's one of those things where I can disagree with you, but respect where you're coming from and understand that you know what you're talking about rather than people who are trolls and just say things to say things. So, and we can kind of start with one of those things that we've gone back and forth on a few times, the whole situation in New England right now. Did you like the Mac Jones pick at 15? I can't quite remember how you felt about it. I remember you talked about it a little bit, but by all means, you can tell the world how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, I was very anti them. Like, I wanted them to take a quarterback. I really wanted them to take Justin Fields. Obviously, it became like pretty clear that they weren't going to get him because he was taken early. And so it became more and more clear as we got closer to the 15th pick that it was going to be Mac. And I really played up my disappointment on Twitter, like, no, I don't want to. Like, I think he's the lowest ceiling guy of the early draft pick quarterbacks. So I was really like disappointed. I think he's like the least fun to watch. I was disappointed for those reasons, and so I really played that up on Twitter. I don't hate that they took a quarterback. I think that like there is this thing that happens when you've watched Belichick long enough that even when you don't love a pick, it's so hard, especially with these with these first round draft picks, it's very hit or miss regardless of who you are, but it's so hard to like really super second guess Belichick. So I guess for me it was just like this is the least my least favorite of the guys he could have taken, so I was disappointed for that reason. But like he's a talented guy. Probably the most prepared to start a game in the NFL for at quarterback right now if that were to be necessary. So like there's that. But there's a lot of really exciting players that are being drafted and the guys who've done really well, and he's not in that lane. So it was like, it's just not that exciting to me.
No, it wasn't exciting to me either. And the entirety of this whole process was everybody saying, well, Mac Jones is going to go number three. And, anybody who follows me on here knows I never really bought into that. I thought it was going to be Fields at three, personally. And then obviously that didn't happen. But the thing with Mac Jones, I mean, you kind of hinted at it. He's the whitest of white bread, isn't he? It's just not, there's nothing too extraordinary about what he does. You look at all the other quarterbacks in this draft class, what does he do that's better than the other four? I mean, Trevor Lawrence is the consensus best one out of all of them. Zach Wilson, probably the best at improving. Justin Fields, kind of, I think that Trey Lance is the best dual threat, but when you look at Justin Fields, I think that has the better arm compared to Trey Lance. So I mean, those two dual threats, and then you kind of have Mac here, who I mean, everybody regards how accurate he is, but the one knock on him has been, well, look at what he's had around him compared to everybody else. Do you think he starts a game this year? Oh,
Sorry, you broke up there. Did you say, do I think he starts this year?
yeah. Do you think he starts at all this coming year?
Yeah. Hold on. Sorry. I can't tell if you're, hold on. Are we good here? Sorry, I broke up a little. I think that was my fault.
I can hear you. You're kind of frozen on the screen, but I can still hear you.
Okay, cool. So I don't. All right. So this kind of gets into the Mac thing, right? Which is like I don't want him to start, and I don't think that that's Belichick's plan. I don't think so. A lot of Patriots Nation gets mad at me when I say this, but I don't think that Belichick was dead set on getting Mac. I think he looked at this class as an opportunity to get a quarterback, and he understood the opportunity, but he wasn't going to be willing to draft up to get someone like Mac. So when he fell to him, he was like, "Great, this is the best player available. I'm going to take him." Like this, first round picks are so hit or miss. Why not get a quarterback? But I don't think that like there's certain players for certain teams every year where they're like, this is our guy. We have to do everything we can to get him. Based on how he was drafted and the fact that we found out since that the Saints were actually trying to move up to get Mac Jones, that had gotten themselves up to the 16th pick. They were looking to get somewhere between 8 and 9 and 10. That like there was competition to get him. There was a risk they didn't get him. Belichick gambled and got him. But I don't think he has any intention of starting him this season. That's like unless Cam Newton gets hurt, and even if Cam got hurt, I would not be surprised to see Jarrett Stidham or whoever else is on the roster get the start over Mac Jones. Like this is not a roster. Belichick didn't build a roster for a rookie quarterback. Like this is a stacked team. He's spent a ton of money on. Even if you don't love the players he's necessarily brought in, some people are they have all these different opinions on him. Regardless, right? He spent a shit ton of money, and then he drafted 4 needs to fill those holes. Like this is not a team for a rookie quarterback, and I don't think that's what you want to do. I think that's a last resort. So no, I don't. Unless there's major injuries, I don't think he sees a game this season.
And let's talk about Cam Newton because you and I have gone back and forth about him quite a bit. I know that you are what people would call, I guess, a Cam Newton truther. I'm not. And looking at the pieces that the Patriots brought in, giving Nelson Aguilar 11 million with possible 2 more in incentives per year, bringing in Kendrick Bourne. I get that the tight ends were a good signing in terms of Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, getting them both. This just screams to me that the Patriots are going to want to run the ball 100 times a game and pass as little as possible. At least that's what it's saying to me. What kind of message do you think that, okay, we're going to get these 2 tight ends, 2 of the biggest tight ends that are available, and then we're going to kind of overpay these 2 receivers who aren't really proven to earn the amount of money that we're going to give them? So in terms of the offensive scheme, what does that kind of say to you?
Well, I disagree a little bit on their intent to pass. Like both those, Hunter Henry is more of a receiving end. He is a better blocker than people realize, but he's still working on it. Jonnu had like limited snaps a lot in Tennessee, but he's a super strong guy, a great blocker. And so you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, could this be a little bit of a Gronk Hernandez, style of thing they're trying to do? Obviously, I'm not comparing either of these players to Gronk, but like those sorts of plays that you're looking to execute and like the systems you're trying to put in, that's obviously on the table. And Aguilar is specifically a deep threat that they haven't had in a while. He had his best season last year. Like he was a really hit or miss guy, especially with the Eagles. I think we've seen like the Eagles weren't exactly utilizing players to their greatest potential either. So like I think people are they're sleeping on his potential. They also don't understand, a lot of people don't realize that Cam was actually pretty accurate downfield last year. There just weren't a lot of opportunities or times to use that, considering the players they had on their team. They're actually a really good fit. Kendrick Bourne, I don't know. Like, you're right. Like, there's not a ton to be excited about there. I never worry about these contracts, these 2-year contracts. They're super short. They're easy to like. They're not going to hamstring down the line. So didn't put them anywhere in cap trouble or anything like that. So the overpay situation is always interesting because it's like their cap situation is great. Like they had put themselves in a situation where they could have still traded for Deshaun Watson after paying all those guys. That was one of the plans that was on the table. So worries about overpaying, like there is a 2-year commitment to it's just not, you guys, as well as I do, if you want to get out of cap trouble, you can get out of cap trouble. If you're okay with cutting certain losses and you don't have an ego involved in it, you're fine. So I actually think that they are. Listen, if you have Cam Newton, you should be running the ball. Like, of course, you should be trying to get good pass blockers and bring in somebody who can play at fullback. They're going to get that guy back, but who I think his name's Danny Vitale. He opted out last year. He'll be back this year. The guy who was supposed to be the replacement at fullback. They're going to be pounding the ball, but I by no means think that they're going to be. I think that pass game is actually going to ramp up compared to last year.
The thing, and I will say this, the core receivers that they had last year were not anything special. We know that, when, who was it, Demir Bird, or was that his first name, Demir Bird?
Yep.
When that's your number one receiver, then yeah, that's a problem, and I understand that. So look, I have nothing against Cam Newton per se. You know, I don't know Cam Newton. I don't think that he's a horrible human being, but I just don't see, especially in an AFC East that now has, you know, Josh Allen, who was an MVP candidate last year. The Dolphins are building a phenomenal roster around Tua. The Jets are getting better as well. I think that a lot of Patriots fans are going to be surprised when, you know, this roster isn't going to carry them to 9 or 10 wins. At least that's just my thinking on it. I don't think that they're going to be a playoff team this year. You know, I still think there's going to be younger, better teams led by better quarterbacks that are going to get in above them.
Well,
I
who do you think is a better quarterback outside of Josh Allen? I mean, right now, Tua is completely unproven, and his wins last year were against pretty shitty teams.
yeah,
And I think the Jets are in a really good spot to be good soon.
yeah.
They're going to be a playoff team this year. So you're really talking about the Patriots versus the Bills if when it comes to a whole roster, because the Dolphins are overhauled. We can't claim to know what they are, and anybody who does is lying because they're really overhauling a lot in this offseason.
I don't necessarily think I'm just talking about the AFC East. I just mean the AFC as a whole because I get that
Sure,
there's seven teams now, so we understand that. But I think the Bills are still going to win the AFC East, and then
I agree.
we'll give the playoff spots. You know, Kansas City's going to win the West. It'll be more than likely Cleveland this year in the North. I would say I think that they've built the best roster in that division in terms of a complete 53-man roster. I would give it to them. And then in the
Yeah,
South, I like the Colts this year personally. But even then, the teams in the wild card race, you're going to have to compete with the Chargers, who are going to be better. You're going to have to compete with the Titans, Titans are going to take a step back. I will say that their secondary got
yeah,
depleted.
they're
They
not.
tried
The Patriots are better than the Titans right now.
on paper. On
I don't
paper, I
know.
would say the Patriots are better than the Titans. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh, they're not going to go away. Baltimore,
Hmm.
they'll be in the conversation as well. I think Miami will still be in the conversation. So I mean, there's going to be
Yeah.
at least 10 teams are going to be vying for 7 spots. I think that New England's going to be on the bottom tier of those 10 teams, at
Sure.
least in terms of quarterback play. But when you look at the rosters head to toe in the AFC, if the Patriots were an NFC team, I'd have a lot more confidence because the NFC is so
Right.
much more top heavy than the AFC is. I just think that when it comes down to it, now don't get me wrong, if the Patriots make the playoffs, when am I going to be terribly surprised? No,
No.
but
Yeah.
in terms of the teams that are there right now, there's teams that I like a lot more than them.
Sure. I think I've been hearing about the Chargers being a problem for the last 17 years, and they never are. And until they are, I'll take them seriously. And I like Justin. Like this isn't even. I liked Philip Rivers. I like Justin Herbert. They draft. They're one of the best drafting teams every single year. I have been hearing about the Chargers since 2003, and like it's very hard to take it seriously. And you're 100% right. But like there is a part of me that's like until they have a legitimate 10, 11 win season that takes them to like a good spot. Like I just we will see. And then there's the obvious. I mean, Baltimore's always good, and they're always going to be a playoff contender. The whole AFC North, really, outside of the Bengals, is always something to look at. But yeah, you're right. I think it's going to be like a wild card situation for them if they're in playoff contention. I personally think that Cam Newton this season is going to be a different quarterback than last season based on his trajectory prior to his injury, based on the like all of the changes to the roster, the familiarity with Belichick and McDaniels and the offense, the fact that he does have such a good rapport in the locker room. Like I just think MVP, Super Bowl appearance, all of that stuff is still in him. It's still a part of him. Whether or not his body can get him there is what everyone's question should be, not whether or not he's a good enough quarterback to still succeed, because we know he is. It's just a matter of whether or not he is like healthy enough to take this team where they're capable of going. Nobody told me he's not. And based on the trajectory he had as a passer heading into the season, like the season before he got injured, was his best passing season. And I
It
saw a
was.
lot of good trends last year in downfield. His biggest issue by far was timing on the short routes and in the slot and things like that. he didn't have a ton of chemistry and timing with the like James White, and there was no Julian Edelman, and so all those little like missed passes, stuff by the ankles, that was a timing issue. And I just we no lie, there's no lies to be had here. There was so many interruptions and issues last season for him. Did he make major mistakes? For sure. But I just don't understand why people are so out on a guy that's proven people wrong so many times. Like, it seems like a recipe for disaster to doubt Cam Newton when this has been happening to him his entire career.
I think the injuries kind of play a big part into it because ever since the shoulder injury, it's kind of been what Cam are we going to get? And I get, the game that he had week 2 against Seattle, fantastic. Um, I don't want to throw in a caveat, but a lot of teams were doing that to Seattle early on in the year. And that's not me trying to say that what was it? I think he had 400 yards passing that game. That's not to say that that's any less impressive because obviously that would be asinine. But I think it was just the inconsistencies that we saw throughout the year in terms of the passing game. And again, they were throwing to you and I in terms of their receivers. It was
I think we would have been better, honestly. I think we could have done it.
Maybe. So, we'll see how that all plays out this year with new targets and whatnot. But we can shift gears to the draft a little bit because I guess that's what everybody is talking about at the moment. Was there a draft class that you just really hated? Because there's a few teams at least that, going over their draft, it was bad.
Well, while I was watching live, I think the biggest disappointment, like right starting in the first round, was the Bengals. Like, I really hated that they took a wide receiver. People have tried to get me on board with it. I understand that he's like Joe Burrow's guy. I get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand why for that particular guy, and considering he's already suffered such an insane injury, he tore like multiple parts of his knee. It's like he can't do anything. He's still too young and doesn't have enough reps to like avoid all of this pressure without a better offensive line. And the guy was sitting right there. So that one bothered me. And another one that I think, I guess I don't hate this draft, but I have been wanting to talk about it, is I think the Chiefs draft has been really overrated.
Oh my.
Yeah. I know.
Do explain.
Everybody's really high on the Chiefs. Now, this comes with the caveat, as we both are big caveat people here. This comes with the fact that, like, I understand the Chiefs are going to probably be the best team in the AFC next year. So this is nitpicking a bit. But I feel like they overreacted to their offensive line problems in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl last year. They seemed to it was like, okay, we're going to spend this first round pick on Orlando Brown Jr. They took another offensive lineman. They took another tight end. Like, they went kind of like offense heavy. And I think that their biggest problem has been over their little span of time where they've been kind of this mini dynasty is the inconsistency on their defense. And I just think there were opportunities for them to find difference makers and take that draft capital. And the offensive line was going to be fine without that, like, drafting that second offensive lineman in the like 4th round or 3rd round or whatever it was. There's just these little things where it's like, I get it, you guys, you're going to like protect. No one's going to breathe on Patrick Mahomes, but he doesn't actually need that. Like, he could have used a little bit. Yeah, all the injuries in the Super Bowl were an issue, and that stuff happens, but your defense really screwed you over too. And I feel like for the last 3 years, there's been this thing of like, the Chiefs defense goes week to week of being the best in the league or like awful.
The thing with the Chiefs, and I was surprised too with the offensive line moves that they made after the season. I mean, they cut Schwartz and Fisher, both their starting tackles. And then the interior was already kind of dysfunctional already. They were going to have to draft a guard at some point anyway, because already the interior just wasn't that good. So cutting both Fisher and Schwartz surprised, I think, a lot of people. But the fact that they love Lucas Niang, who sat out the past season due to the pandemic, they're getting him at right tackle. They're going to put Orlando Brown at left. And then Kyle Long decides he wants to come back, and he's like, yeah, I'll be a Chief. Why not?
And they get him. Tooney.
And they get Joe Tooney. And now they draft Creed Humphrey, who I would assume is probably going to be their new starting center because he was regarded as one of the smartest in terms of high football IQ, one of the smartest guys in terms of offensive linemen in the draft. So I think the fact that they just completely gave their offensive line a facelift in terms of all this talent that they have, not to mention that Tardif's coming back as well. He's going to be a backup more than likely. So, I think that they more or less saw the problems that happened when their offensive lineman got hurt and just wanted to have as much depth as possible, which I can understand. Being a fan of a team with a 97-year-old quarterback who is afraid every time he gets breathed on. So yeah, I get the want to kind of beef up that offensive line. Nick Bolton, the pick that they took in the second, one of my favorite players in the draft, and
Okay.
he's going to be an absolute stud in the middle of their defense. And
Well, they're going to need it. So I'm glad you like that pick.
yeah,
I just didn't know a ton about him. I think that's all they need is like one or two of those guys that like changes the whole
right,
dynamic of their defense. But like
yeah,
that, they need it quick because I do think it's their Achilles heel is the defensive inconsistency. Just like week to week. When you have a Patrick Mahomes and you have like, okay, I'm not to say that the offensive line didn't need to be addressed, but they had
hmm
addressed it prior to the draft.
yeah,
So like I really do. It would be interesting to see. It's so sort of terrifying to think about what they would be with a truly elite, regular, consistent, like top five, top six defense. I don't know, man. It's terrifying to think about.
if he had a defense like Tampa Bay has, and
Yeah.
I get that that's the de facto Tom Brady comparison, which it's hard to make those, but yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. In terms of their secondary, I mean, we all make the big deal about Tyrann Mathieu, but he's on the back nine of his career. I think that's fair to say. And then you look elsewhere, they've got okay corners, not really great corners. So, yeah, no, I get where you're coming from with that. Hopefully, and I think the thing with them is that they just assume they're going to score, 35 points a game, and as long as their
Yeah.
defense doesn't allow more than 34, they're going to be okay. So,
Right,
I don't
but
know.
that's what they were hoping on in the Super Bowl, and that's
Yeah,
what everyone thought going into that it was just going to be a shootout, and as long as you're in a shootout with Patrick Mahomes, you're going to win. Even if
yep.
you're Tom Brady, most of the time Patrick Mahomes is going to win those games, but there's the idea that these other NFL teams, if you make it to the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship, the Super Bowl, people understand how to defend Patrick Mahomes. Like no team is completely incapable of being defended. And like with the way people scheme now, especially now that people are basically doing these packages where it's like you're coming out in like a base nickel package and base dime packages where you're getting used to having to cover Tyreek Hill for an entire game. You're getting used to having to cover, like all of Travis Kelce and all their fast players. Like the mystique is gone. Like you're going to need a defense.
Yeah.
You're going to need a defense.
That's fair. There was the Cowboys in the third round. They
Oh
had
God.
they had three third round picks, and I wrote about this in my piece for Fansided, which should be coming out hopefully today. We'll see. Um, every team is going to have at least one pick per draft that isn't going to be good, and then Jerry Jones heard that and said, "Anything you can do, I can do three times as bad."
Yep.
And just whiffed on three picks that he had within 24 selections of each other.
Yeah.
Um, when let's see, who was it? Chauncey Golston, a name I'm not gonna even try to mention because I will butcher it. The
Okay.
guy from UCLA, and
Yep.
then Nashawn Wright, the cornerback from Oregon. The only reason I know who that guy is because his brother Rajon was featured on Last Chance U, and they made a big deal about him going to play with Nashawn. So
Okay.
you look at all these guys, and I thought I was the only one who just didn't know who they were. And then you look at the consensus rankings of them; they're sixth, seventh round guys, and Jerry takes all of them in the third round. Unless he's outsmarting all of us and knows something that we don't, I feel like those were just he went over 3 there.
I never like anything the Cowboys do. And like it used to be a pretty good like they had a really good drafting rhythm like 10 years ago. And they built that whole team that's kind of been carrying them for the last like decade. Like anytime they've ever been good at all, like it's like the linebackers and the offensive line, they were just nailing for like so
Mm-hmm.
long that I think they've gotten a pass the last couple of years with what they've been doing. I don't understand what their identity is anymore. As a like, you look around at these elite teams, even teams that are, aren't necessarily like other teams in the NFC East. None of those teams are like amazing. They're always 500 teams. One of them's going to win. But like there is an identity when you look at how the Eagles and the Giants and even now Washington, like what exactly they're trying to do, I kind of understand it. And for a team like the Cowboys with a franchise quarterback, it just always seems like they're winging it year to year. Like they've
Yeah.
decided they're going to be a downfield team. They've decided they're going to run the ball a ton. They've decided, I don't know what their plan is. So then trying to figure out how to grade their draft is like, I don't, what do you got? I guess if this is your plan for this year, if you just want to have like, if you're going to go back to like a mid 2000s 3-4 defense, like maybe I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. I think that like of the NFC East teams, you know, right now, like I mean, they have Dak, so you have to think. I really like Dak. I don't know how you feel about Dak. I really like him, and I feel like he's at this point like the best starting quarterback in their division. So like you should, if you have the best starting quarterback, you should be favored to win the division. But like I don't know, man. It's hard to look at that team and think that they're going to make any sort of major impact outside of the NFC East. Like even if they make it there, like there's no consistency to what they do. Defensively, they have not done the same thing 2 years in a row. And I guess we have to give Mike McCarthy a chance here, but I don't know, man.
No, I like Dak, and I think I appreciated his abilities after he got hurt more so when they were dealing with guys like Garrett Gilbert and a starting quarterback. And so, no, I think I appreciate Dak a lot more now than maybe I did before. I still like Washington in this division, though. I mean, you look at their defense compared to everybody else's, it's just so good.
They're by far the best roster top to bottom, which is
Yeah.
crazy to say. But yeah, they actually have been like weirdly, if you look back over the last like 10 years, it's so weird how often like Washington has like won the division a couple times sneakily, and it's just very
Mhm.
bizarre. That whole it's hard to keep track of. But you're right, Washington is they have the best coach too, I think.
Yeah, no, I think Ron Rivera is head and shoulders the best coach in that division too. So having
Yeah.
those the best defense and the best coach in your division, that's always going to be good. And then they bring in Fitzmagic for a year. I cannot wait to watch Ryan Fitzpatrick just throw bombs to Terry McLaurin and Dimey Brown and Samuel all season long. Like there's gonna be a game in which he'll throw 5 interceptions and they'll lose
Yeah.
because of it. But aside from that, it's gonna be fun to watch, which is something that you haven't been able to say about the NFC East in God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
The Giants are going to be kind of fun. The Giants have been the most
Yeah.
boring team in football for the past 5 years because their quarterback looks like he signed up to audition for every white guy in every TV show, play, and movie.
I know.
So
I know. So like literally so white. The
it,
whitest
it
man.
he's the definite. If you look up white guy, Daniel Jones is the picture that appears next to the definition. Like it's so obnoxiously Caucasian, and it's absurd. So I think honestly, the Eagles to me are the worst team in this division right now. I don't think that's too much of a competition though, because we don't know what Jalen
Yeah.
Hurts is going to be. Their defense is bad. They don't really have a lot of weapons. I think
I
that
hate their
Philadelphia.
coach. I absolutely hate I hate that hire. I hate his whole offseason's been unnerving. I don't
Yeah.
know what they're doing over there. Like it is bizarre. And I think that they should be I think that they should have their like premier NFL team card taken away from them. Like I'm done with Philly. I'm so done with like cannot believe the Patriots let them win that Super Bowl. It is so mad even like I was fine with it at the time. Now I'm more mad because they clearly suck.
Yeah, like the other thing I don't get is the fact that all right, they bring in Nick Sirianni, a disciple of Carson Wentz's guy Frank Reich. At that time, I'm like, all right, well, I guess Carson Wentz is staying then. That just makes a lot of sense. You bring in a guy who Frank Reich likes. Carson Wentz did really good with Frank Reich. They're just going to run it back from 2017. Everything will be all hunky dory. Now, they still turn around, trade Carson away. Jalen Hurts seems to be, they're going to give him a chance. Nothing that Jalen Hurts did outside of a few spurs of really good passes. He wasn't consistent, especially I don't think he should have been pulled from the Giants game. I think that was clear. There was clear
Yeah.
motivation on why he got pulled. But even then, you look at how he was passing in that game, didn't look good. He wasn't consistently looking good. I think right now he's just a poor man's Lamar Jackson at this point, a guy who can run and can't really throw. So I don't know. Philadelphia is just weird to me. And you look at this division, the Giants, they at least the Giants are trying. The Giants are giving Daniel Jones all he can ever want. Okay, here's Kyle Rudolph. We're gonna get Kenny Galladay. We're gonna get the fastest man alive in
Yeah.
John Ross. We're gonna get defense. Like they at least know, okay, if we don't win this year, it's Daniel Jones isn't the guy.
Yeah,
If
they have a
Philadelphia
plan. Yeah.
Yeah, if Philadelphia doesn't win, they can't necessarily put that all on Jalen Hurts because he doesn't have anything. So
Nope.
at least the Giants are trying. Now Dallas, I don't know. You can't really call them a running team anymore because offensive line isn't what it used to be. Zeke fumbles every third touch. I don't know what they are anymore either. I feel like this is going to fall a lot more on Dak this year. I think it's going to be a more passing offense than it ever has been before with Dak. And it'll be fun to see him kind of
Yeah.
finally take control of that team because I don't think it's necessarily been all on Dak before. Like last year, early
Right.
in the season, yeah, it was, but then he got hurt, so we didn't really get to see how that progressed. So I think this will be the first real year that they say, okay, Dak, we need you to win games.
Right. No, I completely agree. And like he's empowered to do that right now. Like he has he has that motivation and like you said, he has the reins of the team. Team trusts him. He's one of the best leaders in the NFL. It's like this is I'm excited purely because I want to find out exactly like you were saying about I forget who you were saying it about. To me, this year is like the Dak year. Like it's gonna work and he's going to be the future of this team for the next, 12 to 13 years. Or I think like if it doesn't work out this year and he does kind of fall off or they aren't able to kind of get over the hump in the playoffs, then you start wondering what is their ceiling and is their ceiling like making a wild card round and losing? So it's infuriating that Dak is the quarterback of the Cowboys because he's one of the most likable NFL players, and the Cowboys are. I mean, I don't know how you feel about the Cowboys. I've always rooted in the AFC, so it's not like they like affect my life much. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Jerry Jones. I don't like not for me. Dallas culture is not for me. I'm from the Northeast. I got no use for Dallas, Texas culture, and Jerry Jones is like the definition of that. But Dak is so likable, and I think there's so much about his game that's underrated, and his consistency and the stuff that he brings dated. Like he's just one of the most consistent quarterbacks that he just is. It's an underrated quality that he has. Like he doesn't have a ton of bad games, and in this day and age, like that's a huge thing. Like you were saying, like you don't end up with a Ryan Fitzpatrick 5 interception game randomly in the middle of the season. You don't have to worry about that with him. And so if he could like take the next step, I would be. It's hard not to want that for him.
The thing, I mean, I'm not a Cowboys fan by any means, but the fact that Dak kind of showed how much he was worth without even being there, I think that was the biggest thing for Dallas.
Right.
The only thing wrong with giving him all that money is the fact that they already have a ton of money tied up in Amari Cooper, a ton of money tied up in DeMarcus Lawrence, a ton of money tied up in Zeke. So it's hard to build a team around them right now because they've got 4 ginormous contracts already on the roster, and I don't know. I think they really needed to kill this draft, and they absolutely didn't.
Oh, yeah.
So even like the pick of Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons is a fantastic player, but you got Jalen Smith, you got Leighton Vander Esch. Go get a corner. Like they're all right
That's what
there.
I'm saying.
Or
Like, why are they so
trade
upset
down,
with
do
linebackers?
something. I don't know. They replaced Sean Lee, one Penn State guy, with Micah Parsons, another Penn State guy. So maybe that's just something that maybe it's just Nittany Lion in the water.
Yeah,
in
all
Dallas.
those playoff wins they got with Sean Lee. Like, let's stick. The defensive backs have become so much more important over the last 5 years in this league, and the fact that they're not reading that trend is alarming. It's just alarming.
Especially after it was so noticeable how much they missed Byron Jones last year.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
which isn't a sentence I expected to say going into 2020, but they miss him, and
Hmm.
he showed how valuable he was to the defense by not being there because their defensive backs are awful. I'm surprised they didn't at least try to move back because at that point it would have been kind of a reach to take a guy like Greg Newsome. They could have traded back, got him, and around the 20th pick, 21st pick, if they decided to move up with the team. Um, I don't know what they're doing. And then the cornerback that they do get later on, Nashawn Wright, I don't know how he's going to contribute to the defense. He definitely wasn't a
Yeah.
third round pick in terms of his talent. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Dallas is a weird situation right now. I think, like I said, I think Washington's going to win that division. I want the Giants to be good, mostly because they've been so boring and so bad for so long. And Saquon Barkley is just such a fun player to watch. And I'm a Penn State homer, so I love Saquon Barkley, and I want him to succeed. And I want the team to succeed.
I like
It seems
Saquon
like,
Barkley a lot too. Yeah, that's another guy. They do have a couple guys where it's like it's kind of easy to root for them, and
mhm.
that's like that is a part of it. I'm also really sick of the NFC West, and I'd like to see another division
uh,
in that conference do something, because otherwise,
yeah,
like four teams from the NFC West are going to end up in the playoffs.
that's true. And I think that you look at Seattle, they just refuse to help Russell Wilson in terms of an offensive line because Creed Humphrey was on the board for them, and they take Dwayne Eskridge, a receiver, which, yeah, sure, they needed receiver depth behind Metcalf and Lockett. There's a trillion receivers in this draft. They could have waited. You could have
Yeah.
got a premier guard right there. I don't know. I think what would be fun is if we see a Russell Wilson for Aaron Rodgers trade. I feel like that's in the
I have been.
making.
Do you genuinely think that could happen? Because I've been
I
thinking
feel
about
like
it.
it could. Yeah, why not? Like both dudes are clearly fed up with where they are. They're in the exact same situation. Their team won't help them win. I I say why not? Like I don't want to hear the excuse ever again that cap situation prevents it because we've seen the two
Yeah,
biggest cap hits in terms of dead cap money be traded in a matter of a month
yeah.
of each other when Matthew Stafford got traded and then Carson Wentz got traded. So it's not as if it can't be done. I understand that Russell Wilson's dead cap is $20 million more than Carson Wentz's dead cap hit. But regardless, this is the NFL, and the Saints proved this past offseason that you can go from being $50 million in debt to get above the cap, so it can happen.
Plus, I think
I think,
if you do a QB swap and you do that, the wait till after June 1st thing,
yeah,
and you're fine, like it puts you in a much better position. And then like the only thing I wonder about this, which is this might be a problem that happens when you work with Colin Coward too long. But I wonder if they are, if they're like not, if they're sick of playing in smaller markets. And like the idea of just like swapping to another
oh, you
small
have been
market,
working with Cowherd for too long when you start using
I
that
know,
excuse.
I understand, but think about it, and I understand that's why I prefaced it.
Yeah.
But they both are just they're not they're not Phillip Rivers. They're not like there's a lot of quarterbacks that I wouldn't say that about. I don't think that about Ben Roethlisberger or Lamar Jackson or whatever. But these guys specifically, I feel like are looking to be in the spotlight in a way that they're just like not able to in the current places. Like I think Seattle's a little better than Green Bay, obviously. Like at least
Yeah.
you're like a shorter plane ride to California. So for Aaron Rodgers, okay, he's getting closer. I just don't know if it's worth that. And I don't think that Aaron Rodgers and Pete Carroll would be like the best combo. I think it's so I can't imagine how that would go. Like Pete Carroll's already such a pain in the ass, especially for offensive. Like he doesn't protect his quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers has had a very good couple of offensive linemen most of his career. It feels like a weird fit. But to your point, if you want out, and this is an opportunity for you to get out of Green Bay and go somewhere that is technically still a contender and definitely better than like going to the Raiders, right? Who knows?
I never understood like when this all started coming out why the Raiders were a team that was kind of in the mix. They got rid of their entire offensive line, which was really, really good, and signed a running back who now has nowhere to run, along with another really good running back who has nowhere to run. Um, Now, in terms of the Rodgers thing, the only thing that he has going against him right now in terms of wanting to get to San Francisco is the fact that the optics of that, if he wins right away, terrible for Green Bay. Horrible for Green Bay. If he
Right.
goes in with that roster right now, he goes in, they're the best team in football, I think. If he goes in, they win a Super Bowl year one, horrible look for Green Bay. Because then
Right.
Aaron Rodgers can say, hey, look what happens when I have a team around me and I can win. And I think along with it being an NFC team as well, I just don't see it happening. Now, everybody seems to also be talking about Denver, which would be the second time that they fell up into a Hall of Fame quarterback in the past decade.
Right.
So I think Denver could be fun. You know, he's used to playing in cold weather. That's not really a problem. They got a good defense. They got a lot of good young skill position guys. I think Denver could be a good landing spot. Um,
Yeah.
but but I think I want this Russell Wilson trade. One, it makes sense. Two, I think it would just be it'd be the only thing that people in our profession would talk about for the next month. So, but in terms of the big, I can't see Russell Wilson being in Green Bay because of the point you just made. I don't think Sierra's gonna want to live in Wisconsin
Like
throughout the
if
season.
Shailene Woodley doesn't want to live in Wisconsin, then Sierra definitely doesn't. Like that's bad, dude. She's like a tree hugging hippie, and she doesn't want to live in Wisconsin. Like it's you. She doesn't care where she is, and she doesn't want to be there. Nobody wants to be in Wisconsin, and it's not a shot on Wisconsin. I'm just saying this is how pro athletes are. Like I mean, there. I've been hearing for like 20 years how NBA players don't want to live in Boston because it's too small. So like if that's the case, I don't. Outside of it's not it's not just too small, but it's also kind of racist. But regardless, uh, either way, Wisconsin is worse if we're doing there too. So it's not it's a weird match, but also like it's also hard. Aaron Rodgers has some legacy work to be done here because
Yeah.
leaving Green Bay while they have the roster they have, which is one of the better rosters he's had while he's been on the team, they are finally coming together. They had a fine draft, regardless of where you want to put them. Like they just made the NFC Championship game. You leave to go to Denver or the Raiders. Those teams are worse. They just are worse than where the Packers are at roster-wise right now. LaFleur has he's done a good job offensively with him. So like for him to leave and not go to a better team in the short term where they like can go like I don't think either of those teams he could win a Super Bowl with. I think he could win a Super Bowl with the Seahawks if he can get along with Pete Carroll. I just don't know if he could. And that's
Right.
the problem with him is he doesn't get along with anybody. He just simply doesn't. And that's not just like media reports and whatever. Like I know for a fact nobody likes Aaron Rodgers, and no, like he's
Wow.
just not a super likable guy, and people deal with him and put up with him and respect him, and they like to play with him because he's a good football player. But there's not that even weird quirky guys like to me Brady's like kind of a weird quirky guy. Like I don't
Yeah.
he's not a guy you'd want to go like necessarily go on vacation with. Like it's just he can be fun, he can have his moments, he's got his quirks, but players really like him. They feel comfortable around him. He's very ingratiating. He goes out of his way to like make people feel comfortable. Rookies he's never met. It's pretty crazy. And other like top quarterbacks are like that. Drew Brees was like that. Like the Mannings were like that with their guys. Like there's just that's how it is. Even Ben Roethlisberger, like for the most part, has had like pretty good relationships across his career, and he's not a super likable guy either. But Rodgers is so prickly. He has a hard time, and so like I'm serious. I'm just telling you, like even his former teammates behind his back are like the dude. Like he just and so like you're talking about leaving behind a place that already embraces you to go like take over a team full of like 23-year-olds. Like good luck.
I feel like I know you can't drop names when I'm trying to think of somebody who could have said that. I feel like James Jones at NFL Network might have had some murmurs about that. I'm gonna think of a list of guys in my head who could have
Sure.
said that. But no, here. I think that for him, and this is just my own fandom talking. I've started this whole Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh 2022 conspiracy, mostly
Sure.
because that's the only thing that I'm holding on to right now in terms of after Ben's gone. But that would make sense to me if he does decide to come back and play with Green Bay next year and says, "All right, we'll give it one more run, but after this, I'm gone." I
100%.
will, I will welcome him with open arms to Pittsburgh, who has the
100%.
most cap space going into 2022. Can't afford to bring him in, so I'd be on board with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh.
I think that he'd be a great fit with Mike Tomlin too. And I really, really do. Like Mike Tomlin knows exactly who he is. He has no like insecurities about his place within the franchise and the organization. He doesn't take any crap, but he's still a player's dude. Like he's easy to deal with. It's just that he knows who he is. So Aaron Rodgers coming in doesn't threaten him. He's not a young guy who feels like inferior to him. He's beat him in a Super Bowl, right? So, oh, did he beat them in the Super Bowl? No, he didn't.
Yes. Yeah, he did.
He
Tomlin was
did?
there in Super Bowl. Yeah, Tomlin was the coach Super Bowl 45,
Yes.
and yeah.
Okay. So, oh wow, I second guessed
I'm
myself, and I was
never,
right.
gonna
There we
forgive
go.
Rashard Mendenhall
So,
for that game. So there's that.
okay. Right. So I just feel like that would actually be really good because I think I like him to the Steelers next year the same reason I would have liked him to come play for the Patriots, which is like I think the more established a coach is, the more like really like easy to understand where they stand, who are confident with where they are, who demand player respect, the better that Rodgers would do with that. I think that like the biggest issues he's had is that he's had sort of pushover head coaches and guys who want to be like kind of let the locker room run itself guys because he's not good at that. Like somebody who just says this is how we do things and we like you here for this reason would actually be good for Rodgers.
And I think that's one of the biggest things in terms of these rumors that he's been unhappy in Green Bay. Like when LaFleur came in, there was always that wonder, like, what if LaFleur says into the helmet, like, hey, do this? He just looks over to the side and be like, yeah, okay. And then just decides
Yeah.
to go against it. Like, if you have a guy like Mike Tomlin there who says, hey, let's do this, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to look over at the sideline and be like, yeah, no. Like, I
No,
feel
he
like,
would never do that. Like it
yeah,
would never happen. And because the cool thing about Mike Tomlin is he benched someone's ass for that. Like that's the best part. I love Mike Tomlin for that reason. Like you can't. There has to be rules here. Like even if you're the most respected guy in the locker room, even if you are a first ballot Hall of Famer, there has to be rules. And that's why he's gotten and said what he said about Ben Roethlisberger in the past. It's what he does to keep everybody feeling like the rules apply to everybody.
and I think that we should also give him a commemorative Purple Heart for dealing with a locker room that once had Antonio Brown, Todd Haley, Le'Veon Bell, and Ben Roethlisberger all in it at the same time. My God, that man deserves a hug. Um,
I need
so,
a hug after you saying all those names in a row.
well, 2017 was an interesting year to be a Steeler fan. I'll say that much. But aside from all of that, I do want to touch on this because it is something that not enough people pay attention to. And being that, we have Twitter and we know what people say, the whole support women in sports movement has really taken off over the past year or so, and it's awesome. And so I just wanted you to kind of tell us, I don't know how I want to word this. One, being a woman in sports, how have you seen kind of this movement improve things for the better, but also address the things that are a pain in the ass to deal with? Because I understand I'm never going to understand that, and I'm never going to deal with some of the shit that you and other women deal with. So kind of talk about that for a second, because I feel like it is important to have a discussion about this.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that, Jared. That's really nice of you. I think the biggest difference, honestly, with like the women in sports movement and whatever else is always just like amplification and platforming people. So like the fact that we're in an age where these conversations are being had openly rather than behind closed doors or whatever is a huge step. And like, unfortunately, we're always taking baby steps. That's like the best that we can do because as a
Right.
culture, we can't experience like sweeping change. It's like we just can't do it. So just the fact that we can get on Twitter and have these discussions is a big deal. And like the difference between when I started out, like just over a decade ago to now is really massive. Um, it's, being able to say like, this is not okay. What this headline or this comment or this, broadcaster did or said is sexist and misogynist. Like, I don't think people understand that like 6, 7 years ago, you couldn't even say it. Your job was on the line if you accused someone else publicly, even if they'd come at you in the same way. So, like, we're past that. Part of that is the Me Too movement bleeding into everything as well, which is just like we have to allow people, like women, have voices and speak out like, about what's going on. And so there's that. It's just for example, like you and I will communicate and you'll acknowledge like this interaction that I've just seen is like nuts. Like this is not okay. This is weird. This is awkward. Like people are behaving in a way that seems like really sexist or just like overtly like hateful for no reason.
Right.
And those types of conversations are the difference makers, at least for me. Like I can't speak for everyone, but the fact that there are like men and allies who I talk to about this who get it, acknowledge it's happening, and sort of actively speak out about it is like a huge difference. The idea of like allyship is becoming cliched, but that's really all it is. It's just like feeling supported, so that when I do get a lot of the like hate or the stuff that's like kind of trickles through, there's so much more stability in feeling like, okay, my job's not on the line if I speak out about this, and even if I take a bunch of heat, like the conversation is being moved forward in some way, and it's not being shouted into a void. And like that's huge. Obviously, moving that into a systemic thing where like the action is being taken in corporations and in newsrooms and stuff to be more inclusive and to address like voice bias and the way like the bias against the way people dress and the racial issues even within like hiring women, because white women make up such a big part of the small percentage of women in the industry versus women of color. Like that stuff is so macro, and like that's what I hope becomes the next thing now that we're able to actually acknowledge on a broader scale that like systemic sexism exists, and you know actually do something about it maybe for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that I look at, and not just yours. I mean, there's a ton of women in the industry who I follow and communicate with, and they'll just put out something simple, and I find myself doing this too much. Like I'll just like, all right, I'm gonna click on this tweet. I'm gonna scroll through. I might scroll once before I see something sexist there. The amount of stuff in my drafts that I have just telling people like just like fuck off that I just can't send because like I'm like, what's this gonna do? It's just gonna amplify
Right.
this asshole
Mm-hmm.
who's trying to do things. So I don't know how you deal with it. Now I know that you're not shy about dealing with it because I follow you and I see you address all of it. Is there like, how do you decide? This might be a dumbass
Oh, you
question.
no, don't don't
Like
don't feel stupid asking a question. I don't care.
how there's got to be a large number of those because obviously there is. How do you decide like, all right, I'm going to reply to this one because that one was just especially nasty compared to, all right, he was a dick, but maybe not as much of a dick. Like I don't understand how you
Right.
deal with it because I sure as hell could not.
Well, it's taken a lot of practice. So, 10,000 hours are in.
That's fair.
Um, but realistically, like I've gotten over sort of like I can parse when I've gotten really good at figuring out when someone's arguing with me in bad faith and trolling me versus being ignorant, because
Yeah.
that matters to me. It matters to me that someone's ignorant and saying something where they don't necessarily mean to be sexist or whatever else, and I either try to ignore those or engage in good faith and turn the conversation around versus someone I can tell is trolling. And so like I try to only go after the trolls, number one, because I don't want to go after people who are like genuinely just bad at communicating on Twitter, because I think we can all be bad at communicating on Twitter, right? Like
Right.
there is like you run the risk of like, you know, running someone off who didn't mean to offend you. And like I don't find that to be helpful. Like I'm not here to make a point against everybody who misspeaks. And so I want to stay away from that. So if I know for sure they're trolling me, which is pretty easy to tell these days, especially if there's multiple, like usually I try to let it go to multiple engagements before I like really start going in and using them as an example. And the other thing I do is if it seems like there's like a gang up, like if there's a group of guys who've decided that they're like on a team and they're like retweeting me and like, trying to sort of use me as some sort of like, punching bag for whatever reason, then I'm like, okay,
Right.
cool. You guys have backup for each other. I'm not going to ruin like your day. I'm not going to like hurt your feelings in any way. You clearly like are just doing this to be jerks. And then I can engage that way. And it is like there's days where I'm like, I wish I hadn't gotten into this conversation. It's
Mm-hmm.
genuinely made me feel bad. Like it did nothing for me. And there's days where I vent and get stuff off my chest, and it feels good, and I feel like I make a point that reads to like my like genuinely engaged, wanting to learn about sexism and misogyny followers who are like, okay, I'm glad I'm seeing this because I need to have these examples put out there for me. So that's it's a balance.
Before we get done, tell everybody where they can follow you on Twitter, what all you're doing right now, and then we can get on out of here. But definitely plug all your stuff real quick.
Yeah, so I'm at Tanya Fox on Twitter and on Instagram. I am relaunching Almost Shameless. I my last one was right before the Super Bowl, so I'm relaunching that, starting like with training camp probably. So it'll be like getting back into over the summer. So I'll keep everybody in the loop on that. And there's potentially some digital stuff coming up for Fox Sports. So I'll keep everybody in the loop on that as well. But that's it. Yeah, it's mostly the social media engagement and stuff like that. You know, Twitter is where I'm mostly at right now, but Almost Shameless, go follow that. It's Shameless PRF is the handle on Instagram and Twitter, and that's where I will be updating for my new podcast once I get back into that as well.
All right, Tanya. Love having these conversations with you. I'm glad that we were able to
Yeah.
finally do this. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, whether you're watching this live or when I upload it later as a podcast. Appreciate y'all listening. And yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. Forgotten NFL history. I got to do that later because the last one blew up because everybody likes the Immaculate Reception and Ken Stabler, apparently.
Yeah.
So I will be doing that later. But thanks for
Awesome.
tuning in. Thank you, Tanya, for joining me. It's always fun talking to you. We'll talk soon. This is fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you, Jarrett. We will definitely talk soon. Bye, guys.